Let's go to our guest line. It's
What do
Monday.
you sing about with Antarctica?
Mike McAllister joins us now. Mike, how was the weekend? How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, we're great. So tell us, it was a big football recruiting weekend. What do we need to know about what happened and who was there?
Well, they had some commits on campus in the four-star receiver who is a somewhat recent commit, Amari Goff. He was there. And then they had linebacker Maurice Medley and defensive back Darnell Stokes. Those were the current commits that were on campus. Other than that, they had a running back from Charlotte, North Carolina, Jamal Rule. He was originally slated to visit Wisconsin this weekend, but ended up coming to Syracuse instead. A three-star wide receiver from New Jersey, Nikir Helton, was on campus. And then one of the most coveted and hottest defensive line recruits on the trail right now in T-Ron Richardson. He visited. He's also got trips coming up to Georgia and Florida and schools like that. So a lot of schools after him, Virginia Tech. And then Justin Edwards, a linebacker from Florida who's been rising up the rankings and he's a three-star, but he's an 89 grade, and a 90 grade is a four-star, so kind of right on the cut line there, just outside of being a four-star recruit. He came and visited, I think Rutgers is Syracuse's biggest competition there, but other schools involved include like Central Florida, South Florida, Missouri, schools like that.
Mike, I got a question for you about commit. You say commits. Is there a way to get them, is there a time period they have to sign for us, people that don't follow, recruiting? Or can you get them to sign early? Can they sign at any time and lock them down? Because I feel like with Syracuse fans, we kind of have that jitter that someone's going to come offer more money to these commits eventually.
Yeah, so the first commitment window is in December, and then there's a second commitment window, or a signing window, I should say, in February. So that's when you officially sign. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people think that a recruit has to sign in order to go to a school. They don't. They can just say, I'm not signing a national letter of intent. I'm not signing anything. I'm just going to show up at the school that I'm going to go to. And then they become officially signed or officially part of the program once they attend their first class. So they don't have to technically sign anywhere. Now, if you don't sign, then a school can fill your scholarship slot and tell you don't have a scholarship anymore, and then you're kind of back on the chopping board, so to speak. But there's no requirement that says you have to sign anything. But December is the earliest time period when the signing window opens, and recruits have about a week, I think, in December to officially sign. And then other schools are forbidden from tampering with you, although they're also forbidden from tampering for the transfer portal. We know that happens. So, is what it is. But the thing I'll say about Syracuse fans getting jittery, there was a Syracuse commit, Cameron Wilson, who was at Mississippi State this past weekend visiting. Amari Goff, when he committed to Syracuse, told me, I'm still taking my other visits that I have scheduled in June. And as far as I know, that's still the plan. When you recruit high-level players, as Fran Brown has, and we know, we've discussed that endlessly about how well he's done as a recruiter since he's gotten here. That's going to happen. You're going to have your players that are going to still be contacted and recruited and pursued by other schools. And you may have more flips than what you had previously, but that kind of comes with the territory. And, when you see all these signing day dramas, right, with stuff that happens and guys that flip to a school that no one thought was happening and all that type of stuff. If you're Syracuse and you're expecting to recruit at a high level under Fran Brown going forward, you're going to be involved with more of that stuff. That just comes with it.
Then why commit? What is the purpose of a commitment? Imagine saying to your wife or your girlfriend, "Yeah, I'm committed, but I'm going to go check out this Mississippi State chick over here on the weekend." Why even bother with the commit?
Well, first, I wouldn't advise that. I don't think that's going to go over too well with the wife.
Well, it shouldn't go over well for schools either. That's what my point is. Why, if you're committing to me, why are you visiting someone else?
Well, there's a few things. One, it goes both ways. Schools can pull scholarships from recruits at any point. So even if you've committed, they can decide 2 months later, we changed our mind, we got someone better, so we're pulling your scholarship. And if you had cut off all communication with other schools at that point, now you got to start over and reach back out to schools, and it, may not look the best. You don't know what your options are going to be at that point. That's a tough situation to be in. At the same time, you also don't know what's going to happen with coaches, right? So if you say, I'm locked into Syracuse, but what if Fran Brown leaves, or what if the offensive coordinator leaves, or, some other school, right? What if you're committed to Kentucky and you're like, what if their coach decides to leave or goes to the NFL or goes to another school, et cetera? If you shut everything down and don't keep in touch with other schools, then if that happens, again, you're sort of starting over. Whereas if you stay in contact with these schools, now if something like that happens, you feel like you've got a leg up and you kind of know what your other options are. So why the verbal commitments happen and they still continue to explore things, it in theory holds a spot for both sides, right? But again, there's nothing binding. So either side could at any point decide we're going to go in another direction.
Mike, I want to ask you another big picture question, just in regards to recruiting, high school seniors opposed to, or juniors, I guess, as well, opposed to the transfer portal. So you look at this class that they've got coming in, and I'm kind of estimating here, but from what I understand, they got about 30 prospects coming in from high school, and then a dozen or maybe a little bit more than a dozen transfers coming in. Does that feel like the right ratio, I guess, to you? Or is this year a little bit of an outlier as they try to build up depth? Or is that kind of what you're anticipating moving forward, that it's going to be kind of 3-1 in terms of prospects versus transfers coming in?
I think that's what Fran Brown wants it to be, just based on some of the things that he has said in past interviews and when he took the job and whatever else, is that he wants to build the program through high school recruiting. And so if you do that, I don't think you should expect to see consistent recruiting classes that include 20 plus, 30 plus transfers, because largely you're filling in the gaps that were left by players transferring out. And I know Fran Brown has said, if you develop the right culture, the number of players you have transferring out are not going to be as abundant as some other schools. And so, they kind of plan for it along those lines. It doesn't mean you can't find impactful players in the portal. We know they certainly have, but, I think that's probably the formula that they'd like to stick with to try to build it from that standpoint, so that you've got guys, 2, 3, 4 years into the program, are the ones that are making the big impact.
What about the quarterback position? Because we saw him obviously go out and get Kyle McCord, then he went out and got Ricky Collins, then Steve Angeli. I would imagine it's difficult to recruit, a high school senior when, you've got a track record for going in and getting the quarterback out of the portal. Do you think that is something that we will see year in and year out, that it's the most important position in all of sports? You want to go with somebody who's proven, opposed to, a high school senior who might be a roll of the dice?
Yeah, I think it maybe depends on how guys develop once they get here, right? Like if Syracuse takes a quarterback in high school recruiting every cycle, and, at least one, sometimes two maybe, then they get there and the coaching staff says, hey, we'd love to have a high school kid come in and then, a year or two into his career, take over the reins and be a starter for multiple years. But none of the guys have developed the way that we thought they would. So, yeah, they're going to go out in the portal and grab a couple guys to make sure they're good there, because it's the most important position in sports. And I think with a guy like Ricky Collins, had multiple years of eligibility left, so the hope was that, he could be a multi-year starter for you and sort of start that process, right? With, you bring in a couple high school guys, they sort of sit and learn behind Ricky for a couple of years and then take over, and you kind of keep that process going so you don't have to go get a portal quarterback every single offseason. I think that's a lot more difficult to sustain, especially at a place like Syracuse. Whereas if you're someone like Georgia, you can just go grab a 5-star or a couple of 5-stars and throw a bunch of money at a portal quarterback and see which one, ends up being the best. A little more difficult to do that at Syracuse. So ultimately, I think they'd like to do the high school thing and find someone, but, recruiting the quarterback position, just like drafting the quarterback position in the NFL, is extremely difficult. A lot of people missed the evaluation on guys like Eric Dungy, for example, and there were guys that missed the evaluation on 5-star guys that never panned out. So you just never know.
All right, Mike, anything else football or basketball wise that you want to get across to our listeners before we move on?
Just that Syracuse remains highly involved with 2 elite wide receiver prospects. Messiah Hampton, the Rochester kid who's a 4-star. He was at Miami this past weekend. And then 5-star Calvin Russell, who was down at LSU this past weekend. Russell hasn't fully divulged his official visit schedule yet, but he did tell me the other day that he's, as of now, was not planning on visiting Syracuse before his decision. You can take that as either, oh, he's planning on coming to Syracuse, he's going to take his official visit this fall, or you could take it as that's not a great sign since he's visiting several schools that are on his final list before he makes his decision on July 5th. Messiah Hampton is visiting. He visited Miami this past weekend. He's visiting Syracuse this coming weekend. The original plan, or his announcement date is June 13th. He was originally just planning on taking those 2 visits and going into decision-making mode. Now there's some rumblings that perhaps he could have a midweek visit to Oregon next week, and so we'll keep an eye there. But those are 2 really high-profile guys that would take Syracuse's top 20 ranked recruiting class and bump it up even higher.
Lastly, Mike, before we let you go, from what I understand, you got a nice deal going on with CuseNation.com. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a 60% off an annual subscription, so it's less than $50, and you get a full year's worth of coverage on CuseNation.com. Not only do you get access to all of the VIP articles that we put out, you get access to our VIP member forum where we put little tidbits and stuff in there, that isn't necessarily in the articles that we post. And then you also get access to every single VIP article across the entire 24/7 Sports network. So it's a great deal. Go to CuseNation.com. It's also pinned on my Twitter account. If you want to go check out the link there, 60% off an annual subscription. So, appreciate everyone's support that's taking advantage of that.
All right, great stuff, Mike. Enjoy the weather. I hope you get outside, do some things the next couple of days. It's going to be beautiful. Enjoy your week, and we will talk again soon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Mike McAllister joining us here on the show. And with that, we'll take a time out. We'll wrap up hour number 1 next on ESPN Radio.